dishwasher. She knows exactly what she wants. She wants the same brand because she's my grandmother, and she doesn't want to change anything. And I go to that shop, and I see that this person who has a shop in one of Tel Aviv's expensive neighborhoods, that he's selling, and when I check online, I see that I can get the same brand, the same model and everything in like 25 or 30% the price. And then I order it online, I go back to her, I bring the new dishwasher that is not from her favorite shop, and she's disappointed. She's not disappointed because of me, she's not angry at me, she's angry at that shop owner because she built a relationship with him, and she thought that this relationship is based on trust. Now, he has his expenses, he needs to pay his rent, he has a crowd in the most, one of the most affluent neighborhoods of Tel Aviv. So he has his reasons to be overpricing. But the internet made it clear that we can discover these things. And as time goes by, those generations who could not are unfortunately dying and are being replaced by a majority that can fact-check and fact-proof. Now, how do power structures deal with that? Some of them become more totalitarian. They try to hide the truth better. They try to control their populations. So if you send on a WeChat, which is sort of a Chinese network, if you send certain words, they just disappear. So that's one way to go about it. Others will spread all kinds of hesitations and questions to create a fog of truth, right? Others will just spread outright lies, and expect us to believe those. So in essence, what has happened is that we have gotten a big dose of truth with the internet age, and that imploded on us. It made people understand they've been lied to in many, many levels and different aspects of society. Some people are using this implosion. Others are being hurt because of this implosion. And we call this the fake news era. But in essence, we should remember who always lied. And these are always the people who have power and don't have accountability. Usually in places where you do not have freedom of speech or democratic institutions.
Thank you very much. This was very heartwarming.
Thank you, and I do my best.
I think we all lived that story at some point, and I think that's particularly says a lot because this phenomenon, as you know, affects sort of the older generation a bit more. Thank you very much. Let me turn to you, Frank, because when we talked about this panel before, and I know I-24 has very high standards. You talked about truth, and now you're putting that at the center of your operation. So I wonder if you can talk to us about that a little bit.
Yes. First of all, I want to thank also the organization. It's my first time in Istanbul. I had to travel a lot, but I never had the opportunity to come here. So I will speak in front of you tonight very emotionally. And thank you again for this opportunity. Secondly, I have the feeling I'm the only one who is not journalist on stage. So I will tell the truth. No, bottom line, I was listening carefully what Nadav was saying, but when you are building a news channel in the heart of the Middle East, it's not easy. It's not easy because everybody is lying, but everybody is thinking he's telling the truth. That's the fact. And when we decided to launch I-24 News, it was to give another voice, to change the perception. Because when you are living outside the Middle East, you are very pessimistic about the future of the Middle East. When you are living inside the Middle East, you are more optimistic. And this is something that you cannot see outside the Middle East, because when you are watching news, you see only bad news. You see also a lot of fake news, because the narrative or the storytelling is not connected to the reality inside the Middle East. That was the reason why of I-24 News. So when you want to build this kind of operation, you need to rebuild the trust with the viewers. So how we did for I-24 News, we said, okay, if people have the feeling that peace is not possible when they are watching news, let's show them that inside a news channel, peace is possible. And this is the vision to build the newsroom of I-24 News. We have in Tel Aviv, in the Arabic city of Jaffa, a big newsroom, including Jewish, Muslim, Druze, Christian, even agnostic, who are not only co-working together, but they are co-producing the same content. And when you are co-producing the same content, that means you have the ability to build peace. And when you are watching our competitors, let's go to visit Al Jazeera, for example. Al Jazeera, they have a very nice campus for the Arabic channel. But when you want to visit the English version, you have to go to another campus. When you go to visit France 24, they have a nice English and French studio together. But when you want to visit the Arabic studio, you have to go to another place. When you go to the BBG in the United States, Voice of America is in Washington. But when you want to visit Al Khura, the Arabic version, it's in Virginia. Come to visit I-24 News. And you will see inside the newsroom the French, the English, and the Arabic studio next to each other, because this is the channel of coexistence. So when you are building the coexistence, you are building the diversity. And when your journalists are coming from the diversity, you have a chance to rebuild the trust with the viewers. And I want to say that, unfortunately, in the Middle East, every channel has its own narrative. But in I-24 News, because we are independent, because we are not belonging to any government, because we are a private channel, and I'm getting calls from the left saying I'm too much rightist. I'm getting calls from Netanyahu who's saying I'm too much leftist. So that means we are doing a good job, I think. Yeah. The line, the editorial line of I-24 News, it's not to have only one narrative, but to make live all the narratives. And here we have the opportunity to offer to the viewer the ability to choose himself where he wants to stand.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And let me turn to Adashiva, because speaking of having different groups together, working together, part of the problem, or part of what we problematize, is also race, and sort of having non-Western voices, maybe in newsrooms. And I want to ask you about that.
Great. Thanks, Joe, and thanks for having me here. First of all, I'd like to say a huge round of applause for the I-24 bus, for all the work you're putting to making sure that your newsroom is pretty diverse. That's a very great job you've done. Thank you. I'm going to start this conversation by just debunking a couple of words around journalism, media, and post-truth. Listen, journalism is not media. Journalism is a profession that needs a medium to disseminate the truth that it curates. When people look at me and call me a media person, it actually sends my head spinning. I am a journalist. I am in the business of gathering, making sure I find the truth when I gather, and presenting it in accordance to the expectations of my platform, which at the moment is television. Unfortunately, our profession is now pretty much at the mercy of the medium to which we disseminate. Print, which came first, and then radio, which challenged print, and now television, which sent radio running And why are we surprised that the digital media is giving us a run for our money in television? Every couple of centuries, like 100, 200 years, there is an improvement in technology that changes how people take, receive, understand the stories that we do. Now, what is post-truth? I hope I'm not the one bumping. Post-truth, basically, is, thank you. Thanks very much. Oh, you came prepared, thanks. Post-truth is basically a situation, circumstance where fact does not have the kind of influence it should have on public opinion. And whose fault is that? Listen, the truth about the truth is that it does not, in and of itself, have the capacity to be distorted, to be changed. But the quality of truth that you get depends on who is telling it, what medium it is coming from to you. As a journalist, my job is to make sure I curate the best of the truth. I mean, find a way to incorporate all of the sides so that when I'm telling the story, you see your truth in my story. Let's say, for example, the lady right in front of me, when you're looking at me, if you ask her what am I like, she's probably going to tell you the story from what she's seeing. My nose, my face, my hair. Put someone right behind me, tell them to tell you who I am. They're going to be describing something else. My job is to make sure that I incorporate all of the sides, put it together, and present it in a way that when you hear the story, there is a bit and there is a piece of the truth that you can connect with it. The reason why we're talking about post-truth and blah, blah, blah right now is because we're now in the noodle phase of news. You know, how many minutes does it take noodle to get done? Noodle phase of news where it's so fast, the sites that needed to be covered are now gone with it. Now, to answer your question about diversity in the newsroom and where race and etc. comes in, look, he that plays the tune, how do you finish that sentence? He that plays the tune, he that plays the piper dictates the tune. Is that the word? Is that how to say it? Okay. For the longest time, and I'm going to speak to my race right now, for the longest time, the West, and still now, has the biggest platform for international media. Most of our stories, black people were in the raconteur of their own stories for the longest time because we didn't have the funding, we didn't have the platform, etc., etc. However, that is changing. People are now smart enough to realize that if you want to hear about black people, you want to understand what's happening in the continent, it kind of looks weird to see a white person telling that story to you. But that was the case for the longest time. But newsrooms are now opening up the opportunity to allow the people in those areas tell their own story. And you know what that does? The nuances are not lost on you. There is a certain way that someone who is from a region will tell their story that would be outstanding from someone who just read it or who has a friend who knows about it. The diversity in the newsroom, we kind of say it. I know some people just play to the paper and just play to the rules, but some people are actually doing it, and I'm so happy to be in a newsroom that is also doing it. I picture that your newsroom has all of these people together. I run into the newsroom, you can hear 5 different languages in one stretch. You hear someone speaking Farsi, someone speaking Australian English, someone speaking British English, someone speaking Kenyan or Swahili. And what that does is it improves the quality of the stories that we tell. It lets, when you open up that kind of station, people see bits and pieces of themselves in the way you present the news. It's not only smart in terms of how you make money, it is also how journalism should be done. I hope I kind of went round and I tried to put it together.
As always, thank you. Let me continue with Borja Dargahi, who has vast experience in conflict zones. And my question to you is, there's now citizen journalism, and it's almost like a challenge to this curated, Adeshewa mentioned that she curates the story. And I think as society, we trust journalists to be honest and good curators, to filter, not in the sense of censorship, but to filter and to help us distinguish the noise from the signal. So I'm interested in your take about citizen journalism, especially in sort of conflict zones or areas that may be less accessible to the conventional media.
Well, I mean, I would say that, first of all, that is not an ideal situation. Citizen journalism is not an ideal situation. It has come about because journalists are under attack. Journalism is criminalized in many countries. As a matter of fact, occasionally I'll go to Europe and do some reporting someplace like Netherlands or France, and outside of the Middle East and this part of the world. And it's extraordinary to me, the feeling I get, oh wow, I'm not actually doing something that's bad and I should be hiding it. I actually am a pillar of civil society and democracy. And I forget that when I'm in this part of the world because we are so much under attack by governments, by companies, by people on social media running troll farms and so on, basically depicting media and journalists as bad people who are negative and a threat. And so what has happened is that in certain countries, so let's go back, just for a second, let's go back to, like, for example, the war in Vietnam. There was journalists all over the country. Sometimes it was dangerous, but, as I have spoken over the years with correspondents who covered Vietnam and other wars in the previous eras, they would be on a trail or something, and they would announce journalists, 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 when they would see the men with guns, and the men with guns would generally let them go if they could prove they were journalists. And that pretty much ended. When did it end? It ended in the Bosnia War. That basically people started targeting journalists then. Like literally, if you wore a press logo on your flak jacket, that was actually the first war when people started using regularly body armor and getting armored cars and having all these security concerns. So it actually started then, the danger. And now you have a situation where certain countries have become so dangerous, so restrictive, so risky for journalists that essentially there is absolutely no other way to report on them. Places like Syria, Iran right now, Iraq during the 2006, 4, 5, 6, 7, where journalists would generally hold up in Baghdad, dependent on their local correspondents for news and information about the country. So basically, citizen journalism is a product of that very sad situation. And I just want to make a little plea, to everyone here, and it's something that we should all think about. Journalism, at its best, holds governments and people accountable and brings good things and benefits society, benefits democracy, roots out endemic corruption, and points out social ills and so on. And at its worst, it's an annoyance to those in power. It doesn't really, journalists don't bring down governments. Chill out, relax about us. They don't bring about huge change and so on. We're not a threat. Stratcom, strategic communications, it's probably the worst thing that has happened to journalism. I'm so sorry. But this idea that we have whole departments, we devote entire budgets to manipulating and controlling journalists who are just trying to get good stories out that people read, trying to bring some measure of accountability to like the worst, most corrupt aspects of governance and power, and possibly just entertaining people and titillating them and so on at the most basic levels, pointing out social ills like child abuse and, in the case of some countries, abuses against minorities and women and so on. This is the most that we do. Don't be afraid of us. We're good for you, unless you are such a bad government and have so much to hide and do so many terrible things that you cannot even tolerate the smallest little element of truth. Let us in, work with us, give us access, you're going on a military operation somewhere, bring us along. We're not going to, we're not going to compromise the military operation. We'll report on it and humanize the participants and so on. So anyway, that is my little plea. Let's give up Stratcom. Let's give up strategic communications and just accept journalism and journalists as an important and inherently a crucial part of civil society and our democratic aspirations.
So, thank you very much. I'll let my colleagues know. Gökhan stepped out, but I'll let them know. No, I mean...
But it's not just governments, it's also companies.
No, I think it's mostly companies, to be honest. But, no, I get that. I think it's this clash between, the public interest versus, I think the
vested interest.
Well, yes, and sort of the media being reduced to sort of spreading information as opposed to reporting, I think you mean. And I think it's an important issue. Let me finally turn to Saadet Oruç, because what I'm curious about is you have a background in journalism, and well, you've had a very long career as a journalist. That's a better way of putting it, and recently moved into the government side. And I'm curious about sort of, going back to this, like, curating role and, public interest. Can you talk to us a bit about sort of bias in the newsroom and specifically Islamophobia? I know it's an issue that's close to your heart.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank Professor Fahrettin Altun and his team, Communication Director, for organizing this important summit, which is important, Stratcom. It's not, if I hadn't been prepared for it will be a pleasure for me as a person which has been journalist before and now on the other side of the table. But what is the importance of strategic communication? But it's okay. We will perhaps discuss later around the coffee. First of all, here I will not be speaking with my, let's say, title of advisor to the president, but as an ex-journalist, let's say. As you had said, if one is a journalist, she always is a journalist as well. So, post-truth in the title of the conference was the role of traditional media in the post-truth era. I think we are at a very important cross point. The traditional media, contrary to the general belief, I think, can play a very important, crucial role in combat against that parallel universe of the post-truth. I mean, just by fact-checking, by defending the truth, and just have a problem, let's say, of course, the technology, social media, the use of the technological means just increase the espace, increase the field of post-truth. We can say that there are the number of the social media users is equal to the number of the post-truth fields. One can just create his own, let's say, media, and one can create his own truth because, for example, a social media user, he sits at home and tweets something or just shares a view, and there's a distance between the source of the information So the importance of the work of a traditional journalist, work of media, has increased a lot during that time. Before getting into some theories or words, I'd like to show some images, let's say. In fact, I prepared sort of, yes. Can we see here? That's a caricature of Caméra Enchaînée, the famous French weekly satirical newspaper, about the World Cup organized in Qatar. I mean, it's a recent example of Islamophobic side of the Western media. That's post-truth, but it's not as innocent as the aphorism of a parallel universe. It's a threat against the legitimacy of a people. It's a threat legitimacy of Arabs all, and it's a threat of the white identity of the world against the organization of a World Cup, which was, I think, there may be ups and downs, successes, failures, but you shouldn't, how to say, criminalize a country by putting the footballers, by putting the people just like terrorists. I mean, it's a recent example of post-truth, and the role of traditional media here is to defend, is to voice their own ideas against this kind of, how to say, distortion of the truth. We have another, we can speak a lot about the Islamophobia in the Western media, but before getting into my other image, I'd like to refer to Ole Waver of Copenhagen University, his securitization theory and the importance of Speech Act. But it's very theory in general. I prepared such a speech, but it's okay. I'll just get into other tweet. Can we just pass to the other image, please? Yes, it's a tweet by France 24, France 24, about the terrorist attack in Istanbul. And attentat d'Istanbul, Ankara accuse le Kurd du PKK. Here, there has been a terrorist attack, and 6 people were killed by a terrorist attack, and the PKK is behind this attack. It was by the security operations, it was revealed, and the security investigation is still going on, but just made a clear reference to the Kurds, les Kurds du PKK. The PKK is a terrorist organization, but the Kurds are a part of Turkey, and they enjoy their rights in living in this country. And if you put a parallelism between the PKK and the Kurds here, you give an harm to Kurds themselves. And I tweeted here. Could you please pass to the third image? Encore une catastrophe de terminologie, pas les Kurdes du PKK, mais les terroristes du PKK. Here I try to say that, as I told, if you will, it's a catastrophic, it's a catastrophe of terminology, and to name the PKK terrorists as Kurds is a real insult for the Kurds themselves. Here in post-truth era, for example, as I said, it's not as innocent as a sort of aphorism of a parallel universe, but the Turkey's combat against terrorism here, and the place of Muslims in Europe. We can just talk about the place of refugees, or the many other sociological factors can become a kind of metro of the post-truth field. And here, traditional media has a very important task in just reducing the distance between the people getting information from them and the reality and what is the fact in the ground. I think okay, thank you.
Yes, I mean, yes, that's obviously a very important issue and widespread issue. Let me turn to Frank. As you're managing a newsroom, how would you fix that? Is there a way to fix that?
First of all, I'm happy that Madame pointed my competitor, France 24. Secondly, it's exactly what I'm facing every day. As I said, everybody has the feeling he's telling the truth, but when you have a story, you need to focus from the beginning to the end, and not to start the story at the middle or just at the end of the story. The narrative and the terminology of terrorist is something in Israel, as you can imagine, is very important for us. And we have exactly the same problem with the agency AFP, l'Agence France Presse, because I remember when I launched I24 News, I started to see on the ticker of the channel headlines saying totally the opposite of what my journalists were saying on air. So I tried to understand what happened, and I found out immediately that because of internet and everything, we have automatic agencies going on air to the ticker. So I stopped that. I told my journalists, you are journalists from the Middle East, I don't want to see a copy-paste from any international agencies about the Middle East. You are here to produce about the Middle East. The thing is, to answer more directly your question, today the problem is that we cannot trust any agency anymore. Because I'm sorry to say that in front of journalists, but the new generation of journalists is not to investigate anymore. It's to copy-paste. Because we have to go very fast. And this is exactly what we are trying to change in I24 News, to create a school, because my journalists are very young, and to educate them, start, check the news, secondly, double check, thirdly, triple check, and it's okay if you are not the first one to publish it, but at least you are the first one to tell the truth.
I think Arasheo wants to say something.
I don't know why my mic isn't working. What have I done with it? Is it working now? Okay. Oh, that's brilliant. I mean, what is there to say? Did you say you're not a journalist?
Sorry?
You're not. Your background is not journalism.
I'm a former diplomat.
Because, you see, part of the challenge with most of the newsrooms you have now is that at the very top, the people who are putting things together don't know. I was about to use the word SHIT, but I won't use the word SHIT. They don't know SHIT about the job. So it puts pressure on the people who are actually trying to do the job. The biggest disaster the newsrooms are going through is mismanagement. So, with all due respect, I said ouch when you said the new generation of journalists just copy and paste, and there are people who do that, and I am very sorry for them. They are a complete disgrace to what we do. But there are people who actually do their job well, who do so much work, who slay through the night, just making sure one sentence they're about to write, they're looking at it and looking at it again and again and again to be sure they have all of their angles put in it. But the main problem with many newsrooms is mismanagement. And so if I am actually quite impressed, and I've been on your station a couple of times to contribute to some of the shows, if we do have the top echelons just trying to make sure the right people do the right thing, putting the right talent in the right places, and just making sure that these things work seamlessly, which is not the easiest place. Newsrooms are a melting point of talent, and you have to really be committed and passionate to make sure that who can handle the hand and who can learn from the person handling the hand. Most newsrooms, everything is so fast right now that even developing the talents and helping them grow is a big issue. Everybody wants the biggest star who can just do it because it helps the ratings, da-da-da-da-da-da. So, like, who is helping the ones coming up and who is helping them grow? So it's like, you know, you throw people right in the middle of the sea and they learn to swim, so whatever they learn out of the way, whether it is to copy and paste, like you said, you know, and they can get it done. So it's a big challenge. And I was going to jumping on what you said about don't see us don't see us as a threat, allow us to do our job. The beauty of what we do is the most powerful thing in the world is not a gun, it's not a AK-47, it's this guy and this guy, the mouth and the pen. And people who actually do know are very afraid of that, especially when it's in the hands of the right people. People who are not afraid to say the truth and who are not afraid to write it. And we do need that. And as I mentioned earlier, the truth, in whatever capacity, cannot be distorted, bent over, or whatever. The quality of the truth that you're getting depends on who is telling it and the medium. And it's so, so silly because, you know, I went to school in the States for my master's, worked there a little bit, proudly made in Nigeria, started my career there. But the point I'm making is when I went to the US, I was quite disturbed with how the Republicans have their own machine, media machine, and the Democrats have theirs. And I was like, no, but where is journalism in all of this? Which is what I mean by our job is at the mercy, our profession is at the mercy of the mediums. And I just don't know how we can do that in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you very much. Let me turn to you. Go ahead.
Okay.
Jump right in.
I would like to, if he will permit, make exchange of views with my, how to say it, but he doesn't listen to me. With you?
Orsu is usually very friendly.
Yes. When you said that you don't see us as a threat, the importance of strategic communication, I'll be pleased if you listen to me as an ex-journalist and who always has the feeling, still has the feeling of the information, the scoop, this kind of things. Even I've been an advisor since 2015. I'll just give an example from France again, because I was journalist there for years. For example, after that famous Charlie Hebdo attacks, the terrorist has hidden at a printing house, and the French radio reporter telephoned the printing house, and he spoke with the perpetrators of the terrorist attack, but he didn't publish. Because of the security concerns of the country, he just kept that story until the end of the police operation. Or the terrorists of the Charlie Hebdo attack, they just escaped to Belgium, and there was a police operation going on conducted at Grand Place at Brussels. And before the inhabitants of Brussels, they started to tweet some information about the special operation. But when the authorities of Brussels, they asked people not to share information because there was an ongoing police operation, they started to tweet cats, images of their cats, le chat, their cats on the social media. I'm trying to say it's not self-censure, but sometimes the information is as important as, as a weapon during this kind. So the importance of strategic communication, for example, when I showed you the caricature which was published by, not Charlie Hebdo, Canard Enchaîné. Canard Enchaîné, it's a French weekly. Every government officials, they woke up early in the Wednesday morning, whose scandal will be published today? So many government members said they had to resign because of this. It's more serious than Charlie Hebdo. But even they could designate people, an Arab, they are not only making a reference to the Qataris, they are making to all Arabs, Muslims, something other than traditional we, their sociological we.
I would just say it's a very stupid cartoon.
Yes, but the importance of strategic communication, I'm just giving you a very short, small, small piece.
I think you give it some stupid thing like that in a Canard Enchaîné, something that has I think a circulation of 9,000 in all of France. you give it more oxygen.
But it's not Charlie, it's Kanaran Şen'e.
I know Kanaran Şen'e.
Okay.
I know it. Ma femme est française.
That's
So
okay.
I know it's a thing, maybe has 9,000, it's a little gossip and scoop thing, a little newspaper.
But it's very powerful.
Is it, so what? It's ignore it, don't give it oxygen. That's what as an American, that's what I would say. Is you ignore something like that. It's garbage. It's part of and there's another point, it's part of this, stupid dimension to this French tradition. It's uniquely French thing.
Isn't it to minimize?
But what threat is
You are
it?
just minimizing. I'm not
I'm
trying
not
to say.
minimizing. I'm saying ignore stuff like that. You have also people who publish racist and anti-Semitic stuff on the internet and so on, and people retweet it and they say, oh, it's so outrageous, you give it more oxygen. And I would just say ignore it. It's not really a threat. It's more, it falls in the category of annoyance.
Yes, but the responsibility of traditional media and the role of traditional media, it is just the strategic communication in a world where information is presque. It's just mainly everything in the world. It's very important,
If I could
crucial.
barge in,
Please.
I think that there is a difference between what governments should do. And governments will always have communication departments and spokesperson, and they can do their communication strategy. They always did, and they're going to do that. And that's fine. If they want to have a strategy to tackle journalism or the world of information, probably will have that. Our job is, as my colleague to the left has so eloquently stated, is to bring truths to the world. These sketches and these cartoons, the specific cartoon that we've seen, you say by Kanaran Şen'e, seems indeed with the racist undertone.
Absolutely.
We see this usually in describing Semites, which means Jews and Arabs in general. You could have put that, and we see these kind of cartoons published all across the world, and also, unfortunately, in our region against Israelis and Jews, and we see this against Muslims. I would ask the question, to what extent do governments need to tackle these issues? I'm sure that we as journalists and op-ed writers, they should state what's wrong as part of freedom of speech. But I'm not sure that we would want to see, governments making anything but a statement. For instance, if something is being published in Israeli press, and someone in another government finds this insulting, do we want this to become a diplomatic issue? Because the answer that I hope my government will give is, look, this is a freedom of speech issue in my country, and we don't control the press. And if it's racist, we have institutions to tackle this racist cartoon or sketch within our country. Then the other government can say, so please do that, and then my government would probably say, maybe we will, but we don't have, a structure saying, nobody would call me from the government and would say, oh, you published this article, it's very, very good, or it's very bad for the relations with this and that country, or you published this country. Well, if this is strategic communication, it means that we need to change the freedom of the press rules in our countries, and I'm sure that you don't want that as a once a journalist, always a journalist, like you said before. And it's also, it doesn't work, because there are major issues. If you describe someone in a racist undertone, whether he is Arab, Muslim, Turkish, Jew, a black person, or anything like that, this is much bigger than politics. This is about humanity. We don't want governments involved in this, because this is higher than governments. This is about our common humanity. We need to have civil society tackling these issues, and not spokespeople and clerks and ministers and leaders and politicians that actually want leverage and they want to garner support, and they're going to ride this wave, and they're going to use this, and they do this in my country, of course. Politicians do this in every country. They're using hate abroad in order to garner power from within. We have these kind of politicians in any country. And in my country, there would be these politicians. They will take something that's completely, out of context, and they would say, look at how the world hates us, vote for me. It's very simple. It's not all the politicians, of course. But some of them would always do that in every country. And we should be very fearful of that. Civil society should tackle these issues, education should tackle these issues, and other journalists should call Kana and Shanae and say, hey, I didn't see the entire piece, okay? I don't want, but what I saw was enough. I've seen enough. Look, this is very much out of line of what we would expect a serious
Is
publication.
there a self-control or a sort of mechanism of the press against this? No.
Not in a freedom of the press country, no. There are countries in the world in which it's legal to wave a swastika flag. And not in my country, but it's legal to sell things with swastikas. In the UK and the US, it's legal. I find this deeply offensive. I'm Jewish, my grandfather lost his family in the Holocaust, but when I go to the US and the UK, I know I can go buy a house and there might be a swastika there. I feel this very offending. But this is how they operate. This is, by the way, in Israel, if you'll do that, you'll be arrested, okay? Because these are the rules of the country. So, yes, there are places with limits on freedom of speech,
Sorry, I think I'm trying to string together the whole conversation here. I think the lost word is censorship. The other one is control of the media and whether freedom of speech. So there's like a gray area everyone is trying to dodge and not sort of go there, which is very understandable. But I will speak from my experience as a journalist and having worked in 3 continents now. I know, and I'm going to sort of try and work it down through strategic communications and through, don't come for us, we're journalists, we're saying the truth. Look, social media is a public square. Where everybody without a face feels confident to say whatever they want. Unfortunately now people come for them, but the chances of actually you coming for me in my house is very slim. Whereas establishment media like radio and television, you have to call in, they're gonna know you, and it exposes you. You can get away with all sorts of stuff in social media. As a public square, you can do whatever. Now, governments have now become very concerned that a group of people can organize and consistently say things that are not true, and then it's just a matter of time. If you keep saying something that is untrue for a long period of time, you're going to have followership. And with followership and popularity, you know how it is. It's a big, big problem. Now, don't forget, politicking and government is a game of numbers. So politicians understand the power of popularity. If you are more popular than them with your propaganda, there is a big problem, okay? Now, now to funnel it down to how it works in newsrooms, there's something we call editorializing. That thing they teach us in J school, in journalism school, that we have to be objective. We have to look at our biases. Every newsroom, don't come for me, please, don't come for me. This is a fact. Every newsroom is biased. When you then grow as a journalist, as you grow in your career, you're going to decide which BS you want to take. Because when I'm telling a story of the Black people, I will check my biases all the time. I will try, because that's what I can do as a human being, to reduce that bias. But if I am telling a story to my audience, I will first curate for that audience, and that would decide how I tell the story. Now, it doesn't take away from the fact that I still have to balance objectivity and fairness, which is, all these things played out. But the reason why, say, like maybe, a BBC, we play up a certain story, and then put a certain story from like Middle East or Africa, like at the bottom of the bulletin, why would they be telling the story except maybe it's a big story, is like a breaking news. So the point I'm making, and I think what you're trying to say about strategic communication, sometimes in the newsroom, the editors sit down and they try to decide, is this the right time to tell the story? Are we going to be doing more harm than good if we release and publish the story now? What if we wait one more minute to decide when it goes on air? For me, that is strategic communication. But strategic communication is not censoring the truth. It's not telling people not to say what they believe is the truth. If you think you have a better truth out there, you better be doing the job of going to the public square and stating it. Social media has come to stay. But I do feel that what newsrooms should do is to become the moderators of that place. Again, I go back to my word, as the truth cannot be distorted or changed in itself. It doesn't have the capacity to do so. But the quality of the truth you hear depends on who is telling it. So instead of us shying away from the public square, and I think that's what most newsrooms have done now. They have TikTok, which is bizarre to me, by the way. I don't have a TikTok account because it's just too much energy, right? But we've got to go there because that's where all these conversations are happening. And they're moving fast, so fast, intercontinental, global. So if we're not using the word censoring, AKA strategic communications, and if we're not using the word being irresponsible when we're reporting, I think we're all sort of on the same side. Thank you.
Let me push back in defense of Stratcom. Because, so when I was in high school, I was in a band, and there was a joke where I was playing drums. This is important for the joke. And so the joke is, what do you call a person that hangs out with musicians? Call it a drummer. And in my life now, in my work, I hang out with journalists. And what I've seen, sort of in my professional experience, since you're not letting me moderate anyway, is that part of that, the strategy in Stratcom is about access. So in a way, I don't think it's that contradictory either. The more access you give, I find, the better you're able to communicate your position and to contribute to the public debate, which is ultimately, the more open that is, the more sides it reflects. That's, I think, where the public interest is vested. So that's my brief defense for Stratcom.
I just wanted to add, on the issue of bias in newsrooms, I think every journalist has biases, and every newsroom may have biases as well. But I think that where bias works is where there's consistency. So, I have a bias towards the underdog, the people who are being hurt in a conflict. The Ukrainians, because they're the civilians that are losing their lives, the Syrian people over the government of Bashar al-Assad.
I have a bias towards telling black people stories.
But, so but as long as we're consistent, if we're critical of the Iranians, we're critical of what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians, what the Saudis are doing, what the Americans are doing in their own country, and so on. As long as I think we are consistent in our values, the biases make sense and they don't damage our credibility as much as if we're biased in favor of one government versus others and don't point out when we're selective in our biases and applying those biases, that's when we lose credibility and damage the role of journalism.
Thank you. We need to wrap up, but I want to give each of you maybe a minute to reflect on our discussion and to say a few final words today.
You want me to start? Very interesting, by the way. If you're looking for a job, you call me.
My bosses are here. My bosses are here.
No, I want to say that you said something very important, is about the management. It's easy to criticize journalists. It's not an easy job. We have less and less budget when we are doing news today, and we have to deal with that. There is more and more pressure. The best enemy of a journalist today is social media. I think it's what I'm doing on I24 News. I'm first looking for the managers and after for the journalists, because it's something very important to educate them. And I want to say just one word also about the social media. I'm doing my budget for next year, like most of the CEO. And I was very surprised this year to see that the recommendation of my content team was to put a budget for social media almost the same than for the production. So I do really hope that next year they will not come to me with a budget higher for social media than for production.
Thank you very much, Nadav.
The tenet of journalism is that when you have free speech and you publish these truths, people make better decisions. They make better decisions about their life. They make better decisions about their politicians, about the power structures around them. It does not try in its best to educate people, to tell people what to think. It brings them facts. And from this optimism that if people will know the facts, they will make better decisions on their lives. The thing is that many governments today, and some politicians, and what I'm saying here I have said in Tel Aviv 2 weeks ago, think that this criticism can weaken you. And frankly, I said that about our incoming government in Israel. Criticism is something that makes you stronger as a country. If you have domestic criticism, then you have more checks and balances of power, then you make better decisions, and your politicians need to rethink because they are afraid that you'll write something and that people will respond to that. If there is no self-criticism, countries can spiral into sort of corruption and a steady course into destruction. And this is why journalism is so important. And in that sense, I don't feel, very bad about strategic communications. And I don't have any problem with governments thinking about their communication, thinking about their policies towards the press or towards social networks, which I do think are a threat to our social cohesion in many countries today. And I think governments should be thinking about that, including about fake rumors that in times of crisis, for instance, COVID, can cause real damage and lasting damage to societies. And it doesn't have to do anything to do with the press. So if this is strategic communication, I'm all for it. The bottom line is that we need that self-criticism by our journalists, and by having it, we will have stronger societies, stronger countries, and more checks and balances on those who are in power.
Well, journalists, there's a reason why they call us the fourth estate. We are a medium on our own, and we help speak truth to power. Our superpower is that we look you in the eye and then we say, you did wrong. And we all need that sort of thing in our lives and in our society. Again, I'll go back to my first sentence, which is the truth. They say media in the age of post-truth. If we're doing in the business of the truth, which cannot be bent, they say energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be converted from one form to the other. I kind of feel like that is applicable to the truth. I believe that there are journalists in this place. We're going through a phase that is being distorted by technological advancement, but the core of what we do is truth, which no one can F around with. And so, as long as we continue to do our job the right way, challenge ourselves to kind of evolve with all these technologies, just like fashion, it will come back, truth is going to come back into fashion, and the core of what we do, which is gathering, curating, making sure we do it right, and when we fall short, we apologize. The truth, the different angles, putting in the work to show the different faces of every story. Even if it means calling your dad out, if you're connected to power and your uncle is part of those people, you still have a responsibility to tell the truth. So no matter what happens, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, whether metaverse is going to take over journalism or that happens. The core of what we do, as long as we continue to do it, the world is going to conform in the end. That's my take now.
I imagine there's, many people here who are communications specialists, and I would just say to them that if you're struggling to get your story out and you want to get it out, give us access, give journalists access. Don't try to control us. We see right through it. Just, bring us along for the ride, and unless there's something, really dark you're hiding, which is very rarely the case, you will get something great out of that. I've said this to communications professionals at UN agencies before in little talks that I've had. You want a story about, to get out the work that UNDP is doing on medicine in Eastern Europe, give me access to what you're doing. Bring me along and we'll do it, instead of sending me a press release and mistrusting that if I see how you are putting something together. You want a story about the righteousness of your military operation. Bring me along. Let me see the soldiers in action and allow me to report on it. It will eventually work out in your favor and in the favor of the facts and the truth.
When I was a journalist, for me the story, when I was trying to follow or cover up something, the principle for me was that the story is not what is being told to me, but what is not being told me. So in my seek for the answer, I should not be the one to fabricate, right? Because sometimes fabrication of or just freedom to do whatever you would like to. When I was a journalist, okay, it was, but when you just try to understand the other side of the table and some concerns, you just mentioned health, for example, during pandemic, sort of information, the time, the place, the person who is giving this information, strategic communication, especially in sort of, for example, catastrophe, crisis, disasters, pandemic, it's very crucial, it's very important during time of, and you should not, as an advice, I'm always talking about, just bring me to, you should yourself be there. You should yourself force it. You should yourself just, it's an energy, it's a sort of something just coming inside of you. So don't expect to be, just try to find some means.
Believe me, we do try to force it.
They really do.
Okay.
I can vouch for that.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much for this great discussion, and thanks very much to our audience and to the team that really put in a lot of work into making this happen. Thanks very much. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Question is, why did we have to wait until the very last session to actually get this heated discussion? It was a pleasure listening to all of you. Thank you. I do appreciate it. Değerli hanımefendiler, değerli beyefendiler,